Mr. Chairman, dear President Constantinescu, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank President Constantinescu for organizing this international forum, which is very important for our countries, regions, and the future of generations. It is also my great pleasure to address this conference on this occasion of the 25th anniversary of the fall of communism in Eastern and Central Europe. During the communism, there were several dissidents groups of young people throughout Europe. One of those groups in Yugoslavia supported Solidarność movement in Poland, and I was a member of that group of young people, also arrested as its proud member. I also vividly remember strong support of citizens of Serbia, then still part of communist Yugoslavia, today Romanian friends fighting against dictatorship of Ceausescu. Serbian TV channel was at that time the main window of the world, to the world for Romanian revolutionaries. Unfortunately, we did not follow Romanian example. It took us additional decade of bloody breakup of Yugoslavia and hundreds of thousands of killed and displaced people before we reintroduced democracy. It will sadly take Serbia at least one more decade before it joins the European Union. In addition, who would have thought that quarter of century after the fall of communism in Eastern and Central Europe, instead of resting on the laurels of one of the most important events in the modern history, we would be talking here today about the risk of renewal of the Cold War way of thinking and actions. This is unfortunately a real threat, and we must use all of our energy and strength to prevent it from happening. Nobody needs new Cold War. Dear friends, sometimes in the history, the winners are not identifying new opportunities, and they are losing momentum. Momentum in the history, in changing the world in the right directions. Today I'm going to talk about Europe and the United States as the winners of that historical moment of falling Berlin's Wall. Europe and the United States have failed in the last quarter of the century to reach a consensus with Russia on necessity to create a joint living space based on shared values, but also on common security concerns. Today I'm reading an article in which German Chancellor Angela Merkel is mentioning even that opportunity. But ladies and gentlemen, it is partially our fault. Fall of Berlin Wall was celebrated as a victory of the West over the Soviet Union, rather than a new joint beginning. Although the lesson of Marshall Plan for Germany after the end of the Second World War was clear: after you defeat your opponent, you should try to help him to rebuild a democratic society. This approach was sadly not replicated in the relation between the West and Russia after the end of the Cold War. And that development is a creating outcome today. Unfortunately, as a member of dissident movement in the former Yugoslavia under communist regime, as a fighter against communism, I have to underline that as a big fall and failing. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot help advancement of democracy in Russia or any other country of the region, for that matter, if we isolate it. Ukraine crisis has marked the end of the old security architecture in Europe. We clearly need to construct the new one, maybe by trying to negotiate a security charter that would include Europe, Russia and United States, possibly under auspices of OSCE or some other multilateral organizations. I'm talking about that seriously with the former President of Ukraine, Mr. Yushchenko. I'm talking about that with my former counterparts, current leaders of the countries, but we have to find a solution for Ukraine. Ukraine is not only about citizens of Ukraine, but all people living in Europe, in the former communist countries. Ukraine today is one of the key countries in creating new security policy in the world. Even after some agreement regarding peace, we have many people that are living their lives in Ukraine in the past few weeks. This is why we have to find a solution for such an important country for the European future. Ladies and gentlemen, quarter of century of democratic consolidation of post-communist world taught us about the need to build consensus within the society on direction of the strategic orientation and the need to implement necessary, although very painful reforms together with all relevant actors in that society. The need to build a strong, healthy opposition, to have a clear overall strategy of a transition rather than to do partial sectoral reforms without having big picture in mind. To build healthy economic system as a strong safeguard against degradation of democracy and stability. The need to support not only the change of undemocratic regimes, but also democratic transition immediately after the change of authoritarian regime. The aftermath of the Arab Spring is unfortunately an embracing testimony of our failure to do so. In the aftermath of a violent conflict or an abrupt regime change, countries with the new and untested leaders often find that they need to make many major economic and political changes in a short period of time. Yet, while many different countries have grappled with such problems, the lessons are really learned. Mistakes are repeated, good practice are not copied. Europe alone, Central, Eastern, and Southeastern, has accumulated a wealth of experience, positive and negative, over the past 2 decades. Today, we must continue as much as ever to express solidarity within and outside Europe and show political vision and courage to finally complete the process of enlargement of both EU and NATO. The Ukraine crisis has clearly signaled the necessity to put so-called enlargement fatigue aside and to finally complete historic vision of one Europe, united and free. If this opportunity is missed, other powerful players will quickly fill the vacuum thus created. It is clearer than ever that further European Union enlargement does not depend only on political will and capability of prospective members to implement the reforms, but also on the degree of European Union readiness to complete in the near future its mission of extending peace, prosperity, and stability throughout the European continent. EU integration process has been, whether we like it to admit or not, a major driving force behind both internal reforms in the Balkans countries and regional cooperation and reconciliation. I understand that there are more urgent issues than further enlargement of the European Union, especially now that Europe is faced with a number of internal problems, including the Eurozone crisis. However, I strongly believe that the only way the European Union would be able to reach its full potential as a global superpower is by completing the process of enlargement and by using economic crisis to strengthen rather than weaken its internal political and economic structure. Dear friends, although the Ukraine crisis has raised awareness within the European Union of the failures of the current approach to the Eastern Partnership countries of Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and nominally Belarus, there is no consensus as to what should change. There is still no membership perspective for these countries to join the European Union, nor is the EU willing to complete with Russia its rapid cash transfers to those countries. Meanwhile, NATO is unwilling to extend membership to countries that are partially occupied by foreign troops, as is already the case with Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine. Russia knows this. That is most likely why it has created the frozen conflicts in all of these countries. Future relationship of EU and United States with so-called Eastern neighborhood cannot be successfully developed if it is perceived to be also against the interests of Russia. There is a clear need for an agreement, formal or informal, with Russia on that. If the EU is not prepared realistically to extend membership further east at the moment, then those countries should be helped to stay focused on its reform process by building up the association agreements, strengthening the Eastern Partnership relationship, and eventually giving them the same or similar kind of access to the EU that Norway and Switzerland enjoy. Regarding security integrations, it is clear that Russia will do everything to prevent any of Eastern Partnership countries joining NATO. At the same time, appetite of NATO members to fully integrate Eastern Partnership countries is quite weak. Thus, the most realistic scenario would enable Eastern Partnership countries to have a close cooperation with both NATO and CSTO as they like, but short of full membership. To conclude, ladies and gentlemen, we have to do everything in our power to use this great anniversary as a final push to fulfill our vision for Europe, but also to help others on their journey towards peace, stability, and prosperity. Thank you very much for your attention.